What in the world is going on, people of YouTube? I'm Steven with Purpose Lens Photo and Media, and today we are editing raw photos from the Sony ZV E10. Yes, another video on the Sony ZV E10. We've done about 13 videos on this camera. This is what you guys want, so I just want to give you guys what you want, and we'll go from there. But what we're going to do today is take a look at raw photos. And if you don't know what raw means, that just means that when you take a photo, the image comes directly off of the sensor and goes onto the SD card. Unlike a JPEG where the camera takes the photo off of the sensor and it makes it permanent, like your brightness and your contrast and the colors are baked in. Think of it like a cake. It's all the ingredients are put into the oven and it's baked and it's done. Whereas raw is like having all the ingredients out of the bowl. So you can still go in and mix certain things. You got a lot more control over the final outcome of the cake. And the same is true for raw, where you have a lot more control over the final outcome when you're taking a photo. And I'm going to show you with this one photo here, and just to show you how you can bring back details. Now, I purposely shot a few different shots here with the ZV E10 so that I could illustrate this. Now, if you haven't seen my video that I did with me walking downtown, you could check it out up here. I think it's the right or the left side. I can never remember. Hopefully it's one of these, but you can click up there and see it. But let's take a look and see what we're talking about. Now, there is a car in this shot. That's okay. But what we want to focus on is the building here. If you're looking at it here, this is what we call overexposed, or it's blown out. So all of this white part in here, up here, and then around the wall where the door is and the outside where these stools are, is all blown out. We lost information there, or did we? I didn't mention this, but before, when we tried to pull photos in the Lightroom, we could not do it because Lightroom did not support the raw files that came out of the Sony ZV E10. Well, they've done an update and now they do support the raw files from the Sony ZV E10. So shout out to Adobe for getting that taken care of. And now we can officially bring photos directly out of the ZV E10 and put them right into Lightroom. So that's a beautiful thing. So let's get back to this picture. So I just want to see if we can bring back the detail in this picture and to see how far we can actually push it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at here and see how bright it is. Now look at my histogram up here and I see that it is exposed way to the right. It's over the right actually. So I'm just going to take my exposure slider here and I'm going to drag it down. And as I drag it down, you can see right here that the bricks and things like that, you can start to see the detail in there. Let me zoom in. You see the detail in the bricks? You can actually see that now. I'm going to go back to where it was. It was here before, and you can't really see the detail. It's just all white. You can see little hints of the detail. But as I bring the exposure down, you see that just comes back. And that is the power of RAW, folks. Because it's captured so much information from the sensor, it looks like that information was lost. Now, generally with a JPEG, this would be a picture where we would have lost detail because the camera would have actually cut it off. But because we shot in RAW, we were able to bring that back. So now when we make this low like this, or we bring the exposure down, you notice we lost exposure in the window. Now this has to do with dynamic range. So now let's see what we can do with this raw photo. If we push the shadows, that's where this falls here. This is the darker part of our image. So again, you have your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights, and that's represented by the histogram up here. So anything all the way to the left is going to be your shadows, the middle is going to be your midtones, and the far right is going to be your highlights. So what we have now, as you can see, our highlights are up there, and so is our shadows. So that tells us we have a big contrast here in our photo. So let's see if we can bring up the shadows. And as you see, you could start to see the people in there. We probably didn't even realize there were people in there, but there's a man with his hand on his head. We can actually boost that some more. There's a man with his hand on his face. There's a lady there with an earring in her ear. There's another lady, the back of her head. It looks like we can see a sign here. Let's see if we can see what it says. We may not be able to. But let's just zoom in even closer here. Yeah, we can read some of the stuff here. It says Untitled West. I can't read the rest of that. Red snapper. So they have some fish in there. Some green beans. That sounds good. And then this sign here, I can't really see what it says, but it looks like it's part of a map. There's Florida on there. So you could see how much detail this is bringing back by shooting in RAW. And again, I'm way across the street. So if I zoom out here, this is how far I was. I'm on the other side of the street. But we can even zoom in and look at the dates and the time, or not the dates, but the days of the week and the times that they're open. They're closed on Monday and things like that. This is Big Hammock Brewery. So that shows you the power of RAW. So let's see what else we can do to this photo with RAW. So we have pushed things really far here to the extreme. Now, I wouldn't typically do this, but I'm just illustrating the power of RAW that the Sony ZV E10 has. Now, this doesn't mean that you can just take bad pictures and bring them back, but it does show you that if you happen to miss exposure, it's not that big of a deal unless you really did bad. But our shadows are pushed all the way up to the max here, and our exposure is brought down almost 2 whole stops, which is a lot. That's huge. But let's see what else we can do here. Let's just see if we can bring back some more detail. Now, what I do like about this new Lightroom here is just the new options where I won't get into it too deep, but there's a lot more options here for the new Lightroom that were not there before. But let's just see what we can do here. I want to bring some of the color out in these stools here. Now this right here is just a mask. You can see that it's highlighting it in red. Just hitting the O will turn that off, but it lets you see where you're drawing, and that comes on by default. And you can turn that on and off just by hitting the O key. So let's see what we can do here with the color and things like that on these stools. So let's just bring up the clarity a little bit, and you can see it's making a difference here. Let me zoom in again so you guys can see what's happening. You see, it's just giving it a little pop. Really what it's doing is just messing with the contrast. But if I wanted to actually affect the color, I can move with my saturation here. And you can see we can subtract or add color just by moving this slider here. So let's zoom out again and take a look. Here's the after and there's the before. After and before, after and before. And you really see it on the blue. That one's really making a huge difference here. By moving the saturation, you can see that it's almost like a whole different shade. So let's just leave it there. Now I'm gonna overdo this just to show you the power of RAW. So I'm not trying to necessarily get a good looking picture. We wanna make it look kind of good, but I just wanna show you the power of RAW. Let's add another mask in here. This time I'm gonna do radio gradient. So this just affects certain parts of the picture that's in red here is what it's going to affect. And I'm just going to draw attention to the door here. So we got to go ahead and invert this mask. Now it's inverted, and that is done by hitting the quote key. I'm using my laptop here. Generally I use my pen and things like that, but I don't have that connected right now. So I'm just doing it the old fashioned way, which works fine. So let's go ahead and bring some of the exposure down just to bring some light on this. And actually, you know what I want to do? I think I want to use a different filter on here, or I'll use an additional filter on here as well. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave that filter on, and I am going to just reposition it because I want to do something here. I want to make the light seem like it's coming from one area and shining on the building. I'm going to make this really dramatic, and it may not even look real, but that's fine. Let me adjust the feather on this mask a little bit. Now, again, this is one thing I do want to highlight when it comes to using the ZV E10. Now, a lot of people ask me to do photography and ask me about the capabilities of the camera, but honestly, this is going to fall into your ability as a creator to manipulate software and to be able to take photos, because I think this camera, if you're new to photography and if you're new to videography, the limitation isn't going to be the camera. The limitation is going to be your skill and your knowledge. And it's up to you to build that skill and knowledge so that you can go in and edit take photos, take video, and know your settings and things like that. You know, I think we've become a society to where we look at our products and our things so much that we expect more from them, but we sometimes don't expect more from ourselves. So, but anyway, enough on that. I don't want to get too personal on that. I just wanted to say that because this camera, more than likely, if you're new to photography, like I said before, is not going to be the limiting factor. All right, so let's just throw a little clarity in there. And again, all I'm doing is just making this a photo that doesn't look real for the most part. And I am going to just see how far we can push the raw here without it falling completely apart. And right now it's doing really well. I mean, I've pushed this thing all over the place and the photo is not breaking apart. And what I mean by breaking apart is it gets all grainy and just the colors start to shift and things just don't look natural anymore. We can go and see what we started with before. This is what we started with and this is where we are now. So huge difference, bringing back those highlights, bringing the shadows up. And actually what I want to do is I want to highlight those people in the window a little bit more. So I'm gonna go create another mask here and a brush, and I'm just gonna bring up my shadows. I'm doing a really sloppy job here. I'm not worrying about it being super nice because that's not the goal or aim here. I just want to show you guys what's possible here with shooting raw. And you can start to see these people in here. They're kind of coming to life. You can see the lights in there, and those signs and things that we saw before are starting to come to life. So, you know, again, this is something that you may or may not do. You may not edit your photos heavily, but just know that if you want to, you can. And that's the good thing about the ZV E10 is you can grow into it. You may buy it now and it may be more than what you need, but in a few years, as your skills increase, you'll know that you have the power to be able to do this sort of thing. Now, this isn't really any high level editing right now, but if you're a beginner, a novice, and you've never really delved into this sort of thing, this can seem like a lot. So I definitely understand that, but I just want you to know that this camera is capable of, it's future proof for the most part. It's not the best camera in the world, but like I said, there's a lot you can do with it. So now what I'm doing is just doing some more color adjustments. I'm gonna adjust the hue and the saturation, that sort of thing, and just see what we can get playing with the different highlights. Now this is split toning basically. I won't get into that, but this is just gonna give our whole photo a different vibe and a different mood. We can even make it look like it was a different time of day. I think I like that right there. Let's add a little orange into the highlights. So what these are is I can actually change the colors of the different parts of the photos. Remember, we have the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows, where I can change my highlights, midtones, and shadows. I can actually change the hue and the saturation of those specific parts of the picture, the tonal differences, and it makes your photo pop out. It makes your photo pop because you can really change the look here. If you look at the white, like look at the brick on the building. As I shift this, you see how that changes. Now this one here is going to affect just the highlights, which is everything that's going to be white for the most part, or any bright color. So I think I'm just gonna give it a little right about there is good. And then this right here is for the shadows. So all of my dark places, if you look up here where this canopy is, if you look at the sidewalk, you're gonna see some of that change. And then finally my midtones here, and those are gonna be the in-between. So more like in here, what you're seeing in the window and things like that, and maybe some stuff in the background, you'll see that change. So you see how that changes that there, but I kind of like it right around here. So this, folks, is what you can do with Lightroom and with the Sony ZV E10 shooting in RAW. Now, you don't have to shoot in RAW, but I recommend if you are a new shooter, to shoot in both JPEG and RAW, because you do have the capability of doing that with the Sony ZV E10, which means that when you take a photo, you're capturing both a JPEG, which is the compressed version, and then you're also capturing a RAW version of the file, which is the untouched, straight off the sensor onto the card file. That is the good thing about the ZV E10, is you have the power to do both at the same time. And the benefit of that is that if you are new to photography and you don't know, or you don't have those editing skills and things like that yet, like I said, you can always bring those pictures back that you took a long time ago. Maybe you didn't get the exposure right. Maybe it was too dark, or maybe it was too bright. Well, once you get your bearings and you understand how things work, then what you can do is come in here and you can actually tweak old pictures and bring them to life, things that you thought were lost. And that is the beauty of RAW, is that it can help you when you're a newbie. You know, later on, you can still get some good photos and things like that. So I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you're going to be shooting photos, to shoot in RAW and JPEG at the same time. So I think I'm pretty much done with this photo here, and I'm just gonna leave it where it is now. But just to show you guys what you can do, I may throw one more thing on. This gets addicting after a while. You start to kind of just want to play with things, just to see what you can come up with and see what you can do. Well, let's see, just bring one side down here, make it a little bit darker, just make it really moody. So yeah, I mean, that's overdone. I would probably never actually do a picture like this. We can make it, actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's actually delete this one, and let's create another one from this side. A linear gradient is what it's called. And that's just the graduated filter, basically, which means that the intensity of the effect that I'm putting on is going to be intense where it's red, and then it's going to slowly fade off as in these places right here. So it's just the intensity of the effect. So what I want to do is go in here and I want to make it like the sun is kind of shining here, give it like a yellow, and this is just changing the color temperature here. And I could actually go in here and change some of the hue and stuff like that too. But just to just to show you what you can do with this, there's a lot you can do. It's really endless, and this is just Lightroom. This isn't even Photoshop. So hopefully this video is helpful to you guys out there. If you haven't checked out my other videos, you could play the playlist that's going to be at the end here too. Check out all these videos. I've done reviews, Q&As, I've done low light tests with the ZV E10, outdoor photography tests. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of different information out there with the ZV E10. Like the video, and until next time, I'll holler at y'all later. I'm out. Peace.